Welcome to Raging Bullets, a DC Comics fan podcast, episode 408. We take a look at Flash and Gotham. Welcome to Raging Bullets. I'm Sean Whalen, drnorge, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Jim. Fly me to the moon in a beautiful red balloon, so says the sensei of the whatnot Segulin and the Duke of You-Know.
How's it going, eh?
On this episode, we are joined by longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon, as we start to discuss Gotham and The Flash. We originally were going to do this as like kind of a fall TV overview, but there's been so much content released from Flash and Gotham that we do an analysis of the early episodes of these two shows to kind of get our opinions out there as far as what we're thinking about them so far. It's cool that we have the opportunity now on the show to talk about multiple DC productions that are coming out of the starting gate. So without further ado, let's start talking about it. We are proud members of the Comics Podcast Network, the League of Comic Book Podcasts, and the DCinfinite.com podcast partnership. Sponsoring this episode is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, I am proud to say the pre-orders are available for Secret 6 #1. Available at a special discount of 50% off. Gail Simone is back with the new 52 debut of fan favorite team, The Secret Six. 6 strangers are brought together under mysterious circumstances for an explosive first issue that will leave everyone asking, what is the secret? $2.99 regularly, 50% off, only $1.49. If you have listened to the show for any amount of time, you have heard Jim and myself mention this is one of our all-time favorite books, and it's coming back. It's very interesting to see the team on the cover. I'm anxious to see how this is all going to play out, but Secret 6 is back. Remember, DCBService.com is a digital partner. If you get your comics through Comixology or My Digital Comics, please go to our website, click on DCBService.com, and do your shopping through DCB Services portal. It doesn't cost you anything more. It gives something back to our show sponsor, but also 5% of those purchases go towards your DCB Service order. So remember to link that to your account so you get credit for those purchases. It doesn't cost you anything more, but builds you up a credit that you can use for purchases at DCBService.com. Over at InStockTrades.com, they've moved to Memphis, Tennessee, and because of this, they're doing these amazing 50% off sales at InStockTrades.com. For example, Batman hardcover Volume 5, 0 Year Dark City. This is a $24.99 hardcover. 50% off, only $12.49. You can also pick up things like Walking Dead, All Out War, hardcover. It's $34.99 regularly, 50% off, only $17.49. These are the kind of deals you can get there, and they have a whole list of hardcovers and trades that are available at this 50% off price point. So go over, check InStockTrades.com, and make sure to check them out regularly because they're constantly updating their special sales. Remember, orders of $50 or more give you free shipping, so if you're getting a number of these books, they add up really quickly, and you can save yourself even more by getting the free shipping, and that's our sponsor at InStockTrades.com. Mr. Segulin, what kind of a podcast are we?
Raging Bullets is a spoiler podcast. We go in-depth into plot lines, story twists, and whatnot of the TV shows we are discussing. So, if you haven't watched Gotham and or The Flash, you may want to come back later so you can better enjoy the show.
Let's talk some TV.
Hello, Sean and Jim.
Joining us once again for this segment as we talk about DC television is going to be longtime friend of the show, Art Lyon. And Art, welcome back to Raging Bullets.
Woohoo! Thanks for having me.
Now, this is something we've got a rich tradition of this. We used to do this all the time with Smallville, and now we've got you back to talk about. It's funny how the landscape has changed, because back then Smallville was like a very singular thing. You'd get like a single comic book related show, maybe if you're lucky two. Now it's between DC and Marvel's output. There's just an insane amount of comic-related television.
It has actually reached a point where I can't keep track of it. I know there's Constantine premieres in like a couple weeks, a week or two. Mm-hmm. And then there's, what else? iZombie, right?
Yeah, that's. Yep. I think that's a mid-season, if I remember correctly. I think that's going to be in the spring, if I remember right. And then
I think during Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.'s break is when they're going to have the Agent Carter thing.
Yeah, which is I'm loving Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., so I'm excited
Agents
that that's
of
going to be
S.H.I.E.L.D. is great, yeah.
This is a great problem to have.
Yes, it is a good time to be a geek with a TV, I guess.
So last night we had the premiere of The Flash. Basically spinning out of Arrow, we've got a Flash television show now. Let's get initial reactions. What did you guys think? And Art, we'll start with you. What did you think of the show?
Well, I get to start. I quite liked it. I thought it was a better first episode than Gotham had. I think it was just a little more overall, more solid. A little cheesy here and there, but that's hard to avoid with the superhero stuff. I like the actors. I think everybody did a good job. Yeah, I'd give it a thumbs up, definitely.
Jim, what about you?
Woohoo! Man, I tell you, I've had a grin on my face anticipating talking about this TV show. I absolutely loved it. This not only gets 2 thumbs up, but it gets the big toe as well. I was like, man, this is outstanding.
Jim's whipping out the toe.
Yep, it calls for it. You talk about the casting. I thought Barry. We saw Barry in Arrow. I'm like, man, he's going to make a really good Flash. And then you see him actually in his own TV show, and you're like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He's got this down. And you talk a little bit about cheese factor. Of all of us, I'm the one who least likes cheese, but it so fits who the Flash is. It so fits that high energy, that Barry Allen, that stuff that makes you really dig the Flash and why he's a little bit different than the other comic book heroes. Why he's he's that symbol of hope. And I'm just so excited and eagerly anticipating the future episodes with just all the little sneak bits that I kept seeing. They're like, hey, yeah. There's multiple times I did a woohoo out loud while watching the episode, and second time watching it through today, right before recording, I'm still doing the woohoos. I'm still excited.
That's awesome.
I'm lactose tolerant, so I love cheese. I like ice cream, milkshakes, you name it. I'm on board, preferably without toes. I loved this. It was really great. You know what I really loved about it? It was set in the same world as Arrow, which I'm a fan of that. I'm glad that they're building like this larger universe, but I also like that it didn't have to be beholden to the tone of Arrow.
Right.
I never at any point in time felt like, okay, this show doesn't belong in that world. If you're going to put on a spin-off, one of the big mistakes when you do spin-offs a lot of times is it's not different enough from the show it spun off of to generate its own audience base and to have its own sense of relevance. I felt like right out of the starting gate, this had that. And Art, I want to actually echo something you said. I thought this was a better first episode than Gotham's. And I'm a Batman guy, so I'm an easy sell. We'll talk more about Gotham later, so I'm not really downplaying Gotham. I'm more complimenting this because right out of the starting gate, I thought this episode was very solid. There wasn't a wasted moment. I felt like I got right into the intensity of what this show was going to be all about, and it was very well paced.
Well, there's this interesting thing that I noticed this, at the end where they're commenting about how, or I don't know if it was at the end or toward the end of the episode, they show that map of like the hot spots of weird energy in town, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, it's the Smallville meteor shower. It basically has the same premise. There's going to be a lot of weirdos in town.
I think that's a good premise to start with.
Sure, yeah.
Especially to build this idea of, because the mystery of Barry's mom's death, I'm glad that's a part of the comics that I think that they brought in that was really good. And the fact that right away we as readers of the comic series, we're very familiar with the idea of the Reverse Flash and what that color scheme looks like when you see that. So they're going right to the comics right away for us.
Yeah.
And I like that. But they do it in a way where it's an inviting mystery that I think somebody who's never touched the Flash before will be looking at that blur and going, okay, what is that? And how does that relate to Barry? They did some very smart storytelling here that I think brings everybody on board to the same place. And it's further proof that you can take a character that's right out of the Silver Age, like the Flash, and you can take those rock-solid concepts, modernize them a bit like we've seen it done so many times in the comics, and yet that concept still works really well because the original creators who put this stuff together did such a nice job with it. It really worked.
Oh, God, yeah. And you talk about just it fitting in the Arrow universe. That was something I really noticed that the show did to me had a comfortable feel that I had with Arrow that we have like season 3 by Arrow that I'm used to how it goes and how the play out and just the narration that we get from Ollie. We get that narration from Barry, but we get this bright city. We get this, it's not just the hero in the darkness. It's not the vigilante. He's starting off by episode 1. He is a hero, and it's beyond. He's not a vigilante, and I like the fact that it's that there's that same comfortability that I can tell this is the same universe, but it is personalized towards the light. It is the brightness. It's the Flash, and it's got to have that different feel, but it still has that similar, groove.
It's interesting. You talk about embracing its cheesiness. Sean, you were talking about the Silver Age sensibilities. And Jim, you were talking about the character himself, how it's not a character that you usually go really dark with, right? I mean, you certainly can. But when people think of Green Arrow and sort of like modern incarnations, he's kind of dark. He's kind of a grim vigilante type. And the Flash, I never think of the Flash that way. The Flash is... I mean, he has an overt superpower. It's like Smallville in that respect. He has overt superpowers, and you can't get around that, and so embrace it. And as soon as you realize that, then you have to make the tone different, right? In interest of not having it be the same. And like you were saying, Sean, you were talking about how like sometimes you get spin-off shows which try to replicate the success of the original, and they can't do it because it's kind of diluted. And I think it's really smart that they have these two shows that are in the same world, but they're very different in tone. And I think it was a smart move to have these abnormalities, these metahumans, centralized in that town, in a central city, because then you have an excuse. You have an excuse as to why that's not happening in Starling City as well. Although you could certainly have some crossover.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it'd be great if one of those villains appeared in Starling City and stuff like that, to see it handled in Arrow's world. But it's going to be a different presentation, and that villain's going to react differently to that world because it is quite a bit of a darker place.
And we're going to have a crossover. It's going to happen.
Well, yeah, and they said it's a for sure this season. I watched on for Arrow. I grabbed on iTunes. I did the season pass for Arrow this year, and one of the things that was a bonus was this year's San Diego Comic-Con panel from the Arrow crew. They were talking about that, and one of the things that's definite this season is a crossover.
Great.
The two shows.
Nice.
I can't wait to see what that looks like. I'm guessing that means, I don't know if it's going to be a full crossover between both shows or if they're just going to be appearing on this. I'm hoping, actually, because you can do a larger story if it's between both programs.
Right. Oh yeah, it's exciting. It gives you something to look forward to. I was going to say something about the lead actor, whose name I cannot remember right now. What's the main actor's name?
Grant Gustin?
Yeah. I think he's a great choice. I think that he plays this character. I haven't seen him in anything else, but he's an engaging young actor, and I think he's a really good choice specifically for this character and the way they've chosen to portray him. I think it's really smart. And he's even more, I think, than Stephen Amell in Arrow. He seems like the heart of the show, kind of.
The one thing I really like about him is he does this nice balance of being awkward but and accessible, while at the same time seeming smart and capable. And that's the part where you've got to keep a balance, because he's my hero. I want to rally behind him. I want to look up to him. I want to be him. But there's a jump-on point where you feel like he's a friend because of the way that he's crafted. And Barry should feel... It's funny when you're talking about Stephen Amell. I think Stephen Amell does a great job of Green Arrow and Ollie, because you should be very a little bit more distant from Ollie because of his journey and what he went through. And I like the way that he's played. Barry Allen's got to be different. He's got to be your everyman. He's your 9 to 5 plus guy at his job because he takes it so seriously. His relationship with Iris in this and the quest to find things that are right. I wish I could be as good as this guy. He's got that inherent good quality, but it's done in a way where it's not... I love Clark Kent as a concept. I love the way Christopher Reeve played him because he was almost so good that, you never could hope to be him. Barry, on the other hand, is a different kind of good. You can aspire to be Barry and actually see yourself being that. If that makes any sense, which I think is a little bit of a distinction.
He's very identifiable.
Yeah, and I really like the way that it's being played on this because I think it also changes the tone of the show.
Oh, God, yeah.
It's interesting, just listening to you talk about that. In a way, this isn't quite the right term, but in a way, Arrow to me seems more like an ensemble show. Mm-hmm. Whereas... granted, this is just based on one episode, but The Flash seems more really centered on Barry. Obviously on Arrow, Oliver Queen is the main character, but he really needs those people around him or he would be a mess, right? He needs those people helping him, and Barry seems like, obviously, he needs these people around him too, but it's there's something different going on. There's a different dynamic.
Yeah, and I agree with that. But here's the thing. Because I was thinking the exact same thought a little bit. Then I started thinking about Arrow Season 1. And when Arrow Season 1 came out, it was very heavy Ollie focus. Ollie was the driving factor. True. And then Team Arrow developed later. So I can see a Team Flash developing later and more getting thrown on Iris and Eddie and Joe and just, as well as all our wonderful scientists that we're going to have in here and rogues that are popping up and just all this great stuff coming down the line. So I agree with you. Initially, it is heavy Barry, but I see this really developing, and that's part of my excitement because I do see this development coming.
Yeah, I like the cast. In general, I find the cast more interesting. Again, I don't want to compare apples and oranges. I think the casting is good, and I like all of the characters in different ways. I like the kind of enthusiasm of I can't remember the characters' names. The young man scientist who's helping him. He's got the young man, the young lady, and then the older guy. And the younger guy, I like his attitude. I like the actor playing him. He seems like he'll be fun to watch.
Is it Cisco?
Yeah.
Caitlin and Harrison Wells?
Yes.
Yeah, Wells. Yeah. Okay. Is Wells a character from the comics?
I don't remember.
Is that a reference? Because I don't recognize the name.
Here's the reference I got from Wells. Harrison G. Wells. H.G. Wells.
H.G. Well, that's interesting.
Time traveler.
There's obviously some time travel going on. That's bizarre. I wonder what they're working on there.
Yeah, because you think about the end of the episode. Let's just jump to the end where we get that we see Harrison and we see that newspaper from the future because it was like 10 years from the future.
2024.
Yeah. So this guy he brought that back with him. So I was like, wait a minute, we got a time traveler here. Who is this guy? And it was weird because it was on the second watching is where I caught the H.G. Wells.
Oh, okay. Oh, we don't know that he's a time traveler. He has access to future information.
Correct.
We don't know that he's a time traveler. And I couldn't tell if he was pretending he couldn't walk or if he can only walk in that room. I thought that there's a question mark there, I think.
Yeah, see, that's the kind of mystery that I really like from this. I like that they laid out a lot of things on this episode that came to a conclusion but opened up doors and opportunities for where the show's going to go next. But that part in particular, I really liked that it was a mystery. I like the mystery of the murder.
Right.
Yes,
because,
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think that stuff is all really entertaining. There's got to be hooks that pull you in and want to know more about the series. Before actually we jump into talking about some of the supporting cast, I want to jump back to Barry for 1 second because there's some things I think we do need to talk about with Barry, like the costume. Because the costume, when it was initially revealed, it had a lot of controversy. Some people liked it, some people didn't like it. Well, I'm always a big fan of seeing it on the screen. So what do you guys think of it now that you've seen it on the screen in motion?
I remember seeing a still of him running / jumping down some stairs outdoors, and in the episode you can see like where that shot is, and it's a still that was released, and it looked weird, I think, because of the position he was in. It's interesting that scene, he's moving at super speed in that shot, and so you never actually see him in that pose in the episode. I think it was an unfortunate choice of a still to show. In use on the episode, I think the costume looks as good as it possibly could. I think it looks really good.
Oh yeah, I like the costume. Again, there is some real world feel to it. And you they explained what they were developing it and why. It's a new fire suit. Was designed to be friction and heat resistant. So I'm like, okay, that would fit for Barry. And then you got a couple extra toys added to it. For monitoring and communication. And you know what? I was very pleased with it, and who knows, down the line there may be more modifications coming our way, or they could keep it as is for a while, and I wouldn't have an issue with it.
I like when a younger scientist he's putting the emblem on the chest, and the woman asks why it looks like a lightning bolt, and he says because it's not boring.
Yeah, so it looks cool.
I thought that was a nice line. That was good.
I like that there was an explanation for them being on the headgear, too. That device that he was making, I mean, the lightning bolt was a decoration, but the device itself that he was making was was a camera and way of connecting. So there was actually a story behind the building of the costume, because we're living in this is a world where, yeah, you've got the vigilante over in Starling City, but this is not commonplace. Costumed heroes aren't commonplace. So you're building these costumes for the first time in a world that wouldn't have that reference of actual superheroes. So there's real explanations as to why things are designed the way they are that I really like. Arrow did that very well, too, with the fact that, this was elements of things that they were wearing on the island to blend in with the scenery and stuff. I think that's really cool usage of storytelling to explain costuming.
It's essential if you're trying, to sell those ideas to a wider audience. As comic book readers, we don't even blink a lash at that stuff, but you want to introduce these ideas to a wider audience, you have to kind of explain stuff away.
Let me ask you guys a question. Okay, so with talking about the costume and the coolness of the costume and the design, and I agree with Art. I really like seeing the young, excited scientist, the little geek, our buddy, building it. But the first thought that popped in my head, and maybe I'm wrong on this, but does this guy become Trickster?
Huh.
No.
Well, he certainly has it seems like the character and the actor would be capable of something like that. I don't know.
Caitlin Snow is going to become Killer Frost.
Oh.
Well, I'm assuming because that's the same name as Killer Frost's name in the comic book. So I was like, hey, it's got to be. So that's what got me thinking, is this going to be Trickster?
Wouldn't it be, that would, wouldn't it, I mean, look, you already have...
That's Vibe. Cisco Ramona's Vibe.
Vibe!
See, okay, no.
Oh, yes.
So wait a minute. So we have basically all three of the characters around him helping him. Two are going to turn. Let's see. One seems like a villain. One turns into a villain, and one turns into a hero, a costumed hero. Or
awesome.
In the comic books, that's it's. I like this kind of idea of how the character who steps out and uses their powers in a public way, in a costume, inspires people around them, either in a good way or bad way, but inspires a reaction. I think that those are interesting stories.
We're also getting Simon Stagg this season. We're getting Firestorm this season.
That's right.
and
I read about that.
General Eiling.
Really?
We all saw the Grodd sign, right? They had a gorilla in there for some reason. What is going on in that place? What were they doing there, man?
I am so looking forward to seeing when they bring out Grodd, because it's one of those things. I'm wondering, are they going to do a pure CGI, or are they going to do costume? How do they handle Grodd? Because Grodd could be absolutely wonderful in this universe. Again, there's so much stuff I'm excited about it, but hearing Vibe, I'm like, yes, that's going to be cool.
Jim, you don't handle Grodd. Grodd handles you. It's
Grodd handles you. Well, I wonder how able they are on a TV budget to do a CGI gorilla, basically. I wonder how able they would be to pull that off and make it look, believable enough. I don't know.
I don't see. I was looking through the list. That doesn't mean that Grodd won't be on it. I just don't see a reference to Grodd. But then again, if it's CGI, would you? Well, yeah, I guess you would see for the voice. We'll see. We'll see how that's going to go.
Voice and
it's kind of a stretch. It seems like that would be hard to pull off on a TV budget. I don't know.
What did you think of that? Let's talking about budget. What did you guys think of the special effects? Because it's very important with Barry Allen to give you this sense of speed and motion. I liked the choices of when to use slow motion, when to use fast speed, to give us kind of this sense of what everything appeared like for Barry, but also what it would appear like to watch Barry. So there was a really nice balance of both for me, but that's what I feel. What do you guys think?
I thought, in general, the effects were great. I don't care for the close-up slow motions of him running and everything's blurring around him. Those close-ups, I think that they tend to look a little dumb. But the rest of it, I really liked, the couple moments where everything slowed down around him and he was looking around at normal speed. I thought that those worked really well. I think that's really cool. I think as soon as you show the superhero in slow motion and stuff blurring around them, it starts looking like a green screen scene, and I think there's a risk of it looking a little cheesy. But the rest of it, I think, looked great. I like how they did the sort of red and yellow lightning thing, but it looked modern. It looked right.
Yeah, the distance blur I really liked when they showed the back screen and you see the zipping through the city and the blur and all that. I really liked how that looked, and the slow motion stuff where you see Barry just look around. Those were some good moments. I kind of agree with Art on the extreme close up on his face with everything else blurry around. Like they didn't need it, but to me it didn't seem like they did it too heavy. They didn't do it They didn't overdo it. So I was like, okay, and enough of this. We know what he looks like, So I think they had a nice balance on this, And going forward, the fight sequences, because you saw him do the reverse tornado run, and
classic.
Yeah, classic. They had a couple scenes where he's away, a couple scenes where he's close in. I think that was a good balance of it. So when they're doing some of the Flash fight sequences, I think as long as they keep a nice mixture of the two and not just focus on one perspective, we're going to get some cool visual stuff.
I wonder how much. I was watching it with a friend, and when he was doing the reverse running around the tornado, my friend said, "Is he digging a hole?" Because if you're running on open ground, normal ground, running at that speed, I think you're going to start digging a hole. But it's one of those things that we probably shouldn't think too hard about.
Yeah, I actually like that kind of stuff, though, because I think that is a part of being a Flash reader or a Flash fan, is you start wondering what would this stuff be like in real life. So now we have an opportunity to see it a little bit closer to that and start wondering about those things. I loved the casting of his dad.
Yes.
What a great touch, I mean, that's the kind of way that you win over fans, right?
Oh, yeah.
And he's a good actor. He's aged well. He looks like a dad in prison. This is an actor who can play older characters. He can look grizzled, Now,
did you guys know he was cast for the dad? Because I had no idea until I saw him. I'm like, oh my God, that's awesome!
I knew that he was cast in the show. I'm not sure if I knew that he was cast as the dad, and so that was a pleasant surprise.
Thawne was interesting. Him being the boyfriend of Iris, knowing what we know about that family history with Barry.
Yeah.
I'm going to be curious to see if he becomes Reverse Flash or if it's going to be some family member of his, if the placement was by accident or on purpose. Like, there's a story there that's waiting to be told, and that name, just the mention of it in the show, has me real interested.
Oh, see, I'm not as well versed in the Flash mythology, I guess. I didn't recognize that.
Well, that's the family name of the Reverse Flash.
Reverse Flash. Okay.
So
sorry.
No. It's and my question is that going to be Reverse Flash? Is it going to be some descendant that's going to become Reverse Flash because of some path?
Well,
I don't know.
This is one of the things I find really interesting about the show. As I see it, you have 4 candidates. Now that you mentioned that, as the Reverse Flash, you have Wells. You have this other guy that you just mentioned. He's a what's the name again?
Eddie Thawne.
Right. Okay. You have him. You have Barry's dad, who I mean, imagine if he gets access, to some kind of power and tries to go back and stop it and discovers he's, the one that made it happen, right? You could have that kind of storyline, or it could be Barry. I don't know what happens, but we're talking time travel and people trying, to fix things, going back and trying, to stop things from happening, and that never goes well. Right?
I think because of how much Flash I've read, I'm assuming it's Eddie. Mm-hmm. But here's the great thing about this. As you were rattling off names, I'm like, well, they could certainly swerve us, and I would certainly be all for it. And they may be deliberately trying to swerve comic fans with that. I have no issue with it at all. I think it would be just as interesting. I love that there's things that they're doing in this that are blatantly winks and nods right back to the comic book world. But they can take a different path with it. Arrow's already done similar things where they've stayed true to concepts while at the same time adding a new twist, a new dimension, a new wrinkle to it. And I like that this, again, kind of like Arrow, it feels like a Elseworlds that's very close to the DC universe, but it's still an Elseworlds, which gives them a open door to tell the stories that they want to tell with the characters and the themes. And that part works, and it needs to work here as well. And it seems to be the direction that they're heading in. You're getting the framework right, while at the same time having some fun exploring possibilities. Mm-hmm. And that really is important with these shows.
Here was my theory on who the Reverse Flash was, or the ball of lightning that we saw.
Right.
Because when I first saw the first watching of the episode, I immediately thought, okay, Eddie, somehow he's going to become the Flash, and it's just because I knew the name. But then I started thinking, remembering back to Arrow, when we were first introduced to Tommy Merlin. And we're like, oh, that's going to become his arch enemy. Oh, wow. And we're thinking, hey, that's going to be Merlin. And it turns out, no, it was Tommy's dad who becomes Merlin, who becomes, Ollie's enemy. So I'm thinking the Eddie Thawne is kind of thrown in there to get us thinking it's going to be him. And it's either going to be his family descendant who came back, or I was kind of leaning towards, Professor Wells is really ancestor of Eddie's, and he's back, because, and that's who's actually going to be in the Ball of Light. Though I do like the dad theory, trying to save the day, gets the power, tries to save his wife, but ends up causing more problems. I like that story. That would be a neat way to go.
And the fact that we're bouncing all this around, I think, is a credit to the storytelling and the decisions that they're making, even just in this first episode, that they've laid this much groundwork that we're talking about, all these theories. There's enough. You have an advantage here over Arrow in that you have superpowers and time travel and who knows what else. And so, once you do that, anything's possible. As soon as you put time travel in there, all bets are off, right?
I'm still going with Professor Zoom. I still think it's Eddie. I'm open-minded that it was something else, but
Yeah, and if it turns out to be Eddie, I'll be happy with that because it's kind of neat to see the story play out. But I do like the fact I agree with you, Art. Man, this is awesome. How they are just in one episode. We're already thinking off page. We're already thinking, well, it could be this, it could be that. If this was a nothing of an episode, if this was a nothing of a show, it wouldn't have us thinking this wide variety, thinking about what about this, what about this. I'm so excited for this.
I can see a scenario in which Iris and Barry, something happens, and Iris and Barry get back together or become, an item, and Eddie gets jealous, and maybe it happens in a way that makes him look really bad, and that's where we get the origin of him as an arch enemy of the Flash. I can see that kind of thing happening.
I was glad to see the development of the police department. I think that's a really critical part of the Flash universe, that it's not just him. They did a lot, I think, in a first episode in the right way. And I think when we talk about Gotham later, I'll talk a little bit more about why the way they handled this, focusing on Barry so much, I think, on this one and his development, I think was really critical, because I was very interested in each of the supporting cast members in their core pockets as they were introduced. I want to see more as the story develops with them. I thought the use of Detective West in particular, with the questioning of what Barry saw and what Barry didn't, and his obsession with the case. Now, at the end, because of what he knows now, he's starting to realize, wait a minute, you did see, maybe I was the one in denial, not you.
I'm surprised that they had Detective West discover that, in the first episode. I think that I would have almost rather they string that out. At least a couple episodes have his realization that Barry has these powers and how wrong he's been. Make that an episode, make that a thing. But still, it's there's nothing wrong with it.
Yeah, I was kind of shocked by that as well, because you think about that final fight scene when he's going up against Martin and his mask is down. I was half expecting to see him pull up the mask and then take off running, but they had that whole dialogue, so I was like, it's one of those. I would have liked to have seen it wait a little bit longer, but I'm not angry that they did it, because we had that powerful scene earlier after when Barry saves Iris with the car accident. When he first sees that it's Martin, and he's telling him, "Hey, I know who it was. He's dead," and just that great emotional outpouring. And he's like, you got to just face reality. You didn't see anything. Your dad killed your mom, and I just love just how it was that anger out. That outlash of anger, but it wasn't like a violent anger. It was a come on, man, you gotta snap to. It was that friend giving you that that proverbial shake just to get you seeing straight.
Snap out of it, man.
Yeah, exactly. That kind of anger. So you get that moment, and then at the end of the episode, you get that, oh my God, I was wrong. And I love just that actor, the way he did the anger and the passion earlier than just that sorrow and, oh, my God, an innocent man is in prison right now. And I love just seeing that, because, that's when you get a really good cop and you get a really good person who's portraying the cop, it's that, the higher ideology of the police officer who wants to put the bad guys away, wants to make sure that an innocent man isn't behind bars. And, Detective West is one of those good guys, and he's going to fight for, Barry's dad now. I'm like, man, that's just, again, more stuff I'm excited about.
It's interesting. That reminds me of something else. There's a really smart thing that they do, at least in this first episode, in that you have all the characters around Barry really like him.
Yeah.
And that helps him, that helps us as the audience read him as this likable guy. I think the actor and his performance goes a long way towards that. But you have Detective West, and you also have his immediate supervisor at the beginning, early in the episode. He arrives at that crime scene, and is it Detective West who does this, or is it somebody else who says, "Do you have that thing I asked you for?"
Detective West.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. you create this relationship of like, this is a guy who's looking out for Barry, who really likes him and sees real promise in him, right?
Barry lived with him too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, after his
Okay.
parents died.
Right, that's right. Okay. Yeah. Yes. Oh, he's kind of like a surrogate dad, and Barry is maybe, like the son he never had, right?
Yeah.
Kind of.
And to go along with what you're saying, Art, I did like the fact that we had a lot of camaraderie in the police department. That's something when I watch a show that has a police department, I do want to see that type of stuff. Now, not it's typically you're going to get with any job, you get people who butt heads and people who don't like each other. But the one thing I've always seen is even when two cops don't like each other, they still support and back each other.
Right.
And there still is a respect and a professional courtesy that they extend between each other. And I like seeing that was extended to Barry by the other officers. Even though Singh doesn't like him, he still lets Barry do his thing. He still lets Barry give his opinion and then actually operates on his analysis.
And they'll tease him and stuff, but it's obvious that they recognize that he does a good job.
Yeah.
Yeah. When Wells is explaining what happened, he mentions, I can't remember exactly the phrase. I just watched it last night. I haven't watched it a second time. But he says something about alternate dimensions, right, or something. He says, basically that they opened up a dimensional portal of some kind, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as he said that, I was like, oh, really?
Yeah.
because now, like, literally anything could happen. I mean, you can bring anything into this show now. You could do any darn thing you want. You can do alternate realities. You could do aliens. You could do... Yeah, it's not just weird energies were released. He actually comes out and says, an opening into dimensions or something. I thought that was another way to expand the scope of the show and establish that this is going to be a certain kind of show,
Yeah, definite. Yeah, I'm with you on that when they started talking about that and just listing all the different types of theoretical energies that actually came through. So, it does have the Smallville kind of meteor rock freak, feel to it, but again, there's still going to be more of an explanation and there's going to be more personalizing how and where it came about, and so I'm excited for this stuff.
You just hit on something else that I had just written myself a note about, and that is, I wonder if we will see any kind of connection between the kinds of powers that people get and like who they are or when and where they got them. Where were they when this radiation burst happened, and what were they doing? Because the weather wizard guy, he got his powers. He was in the sky in the middle of a storm, right? So there's a connection there. I wonder if we'll see more of that kind of thing. I think that would be interesting.
I'm assuming we're going to get that. And speaking of the weather wizard, now at the end of the episode, he gets shot, and then I rewatched that scene a couple times where Barry and Detective West are talking, and in the background, you see them loading up a body bag and taking it out. Now, did you guys take it that he's dead? Or was that the body bag that the other cop was in?
Oh, good question. I did not notice that. I did not think about it. I guess I assumed he was dead. I mean, he was hit pretty significant. I mean, it was like one shot. It hit him somewhere in the upper body, right? And he flew. He was down. But I guess I didn't really think of it much past that.
I could see both possibilities. The second you were saying it, Jim, I guess I thought he was dead too, but then now the way that you presented it, I'm like, well, no, I could see it being either way. They always in these shows leave ways to bring
sure.
if you want to.
So. Well, the way you do this is there were two brothers.
Oh.
Two brothers both hit. So I was taking it that brother one is dead. Brother two comes back as the weather wizard.
That's a possibility. You could also, with Wells being up to we don't know what. I mean, even before things got weird, he was up to we don't know what. but now he's up to even more. We don't know what, and he could use that body. It would be really useful to him.
Yeah.
Even recently dead, it would still be useful to him, right?
Oh yeah, he's got the mad scientist look to him. He can pull that stuff off.
I think he's a really good character. I think that's another character who is well cast.
He plays Clyde Martin, who is the younger brother of Mark Martin, who was the Weather Wizard.
There we go.
So what Jim's saying is a very good possibility.
Okay. Yep. That would not surprise me at all. Then, I think one of my favorite aspects of this episode is the whole sequence with the death of his mom and the effects in that scene. I think there's this really great horror element in those scenes, and I think that's a really good addition to an episode and a show, which in general is going to be kind of superheroes in costumes. It's going to have a lot of over the top stuff. I like this introduction of this, the dad in prison and this horror element. I think helps to ground it. There's this tragic element in there, and you have the whole scene in the house when he's a kid with his mom and dad. I mean, that's right out of a horror movie kind of. I think that those are really neat additions, smartly done, I think.
Yeah, I agree with that. I like that because you mentioned the horror kind of feel to it, and just that the kid waking up and just I agree.
Right.
That was a cool scene. One of the scenes I really liked. And it's going to be a weird comment for me to say, but it was when he first wakes up, and you get that opening, and they're talking. You were hit by lightning, and he goes, "Lightning gave me abs." I thought that had me just laughing hysterically. Just again, it was little funny moments like that. Like when he first walks out in that the spandex outfit and the hat, and you're like, "What the heck is this?" And he's like, those little comedic moments like that. But those moments never took away from the coolness of the episode. So I hope that's something I hope they keep throughout this run going.
It's another example of them embracing the goofiness of it. If you're going to have these weird powers and all this weird stuff going on, don't run from it. Embrace it and make it like a part of the show. And so they added in these goofy elements, and that's a way of kind of winking and nodding at the audience without the audience knowing you're winking and nodding at them. Kind of. I think that's a smart move.
Oh, big time, big time.
Is there anything else you guys want to say about Flash before we move on and start talking about Gotham?
That Grodd thing really got me. I was like, well, really? Grodd was there? Because it really opens up a can of worms. Like, what was going on there to start with? I mean, there was something very underhanded going on there.
Oh, yeah, he's got mad scientists written all over him.
And there's a big backstory there, and I love it. It's great.
All right, so let's jump on and talk about Gotham now. That's our other show. We're 3 episodes into Gotham, and there's been a lot of story development. I think we already started to talk about some of our feelings about the initial opening episode. Why don't we kind of talk about the blanket? What has it been like so far now that we've got 3 under our belt? Because for me, the opening episode, I enjoyed. I thought it was a good episode. I think because it was introducing so much in the opening episode that I didn't really get a vibe for the full direction of the series yet, whereas I thought episodes 2 and 3 were fantastic. And I think because of that, episode 1, I looked at myself as a prologue, and after we got all that info set up and they kicked the next 2 episodes off the ground and running, this show has turned into, for me, a must-watch. But the first episode, if anytime people ask me, what'd you think of it? It was good. I just wasn't blown away. Mm-hmm. I've really enjoyed the development since then, though. But where are you guys at?
Jim, do you want to go?
Well, I'm kind of echoing your feelings a lot on this one. When that first episode came out, I was like, man, it's a good story. It's a good episode. when people say, "Hey, what'd you think about it?" I'm like, "Well, I thought it was a really good show, and it's a good episode." But I wasn't like, "Oh my god, it's the greatest!" Like I was more excited, more energetic after Flash than I was after episode 1 of Gotham. But as I rewatched episode 1, then when episode 2 came, watched episode 2 a second time, episode 3, watched that a second time. It's getting multiple watchings on this, and it's just as these episodes are coming out, I'm like, this is cool. Okay, I'm in. Oh yeah, and I started. It was that groove going, and you get the train is chugging along, and it's building up steam, and you start getting this connection to all of the characters. You get this feeling of who Gordon is, and just all the full supporting cast, and you're like, okay, they've got something here. Because first you always wonder, how can you do Gotham without Batman? Well, here's how you do it. You tell a story about the city and all these wonderful characters, how they came about. We know how Batman came about. Well, now we're learning how Penguin, how Catwoman, where Gordon came from, where the different crime bosses. We're going to learn all this stuff popping up, and I'm like, you know what? This is a solid This is a solid show. This is really good, and I'm getting excited for where Gotham's going to go now.
Like I said earlier, I had a few problems with the first episode. I thought it was a little clunky here and there, but I try to not hold that against a TV series, because the amount of work that goes into getting a series off the ground. In that first episode, the actors and everybody involved are still finding their sea legs, and so I try not to hold that against them. It's like reading, the first chapter of a book and judging it by the first chapter. It's not fair, really. I like it. I'm a little more excited about Flash. I think but I'm trying to think in general. I think it'll be interesting to see how it balances the satisfaction of a police procedural, kind of show, and a show about the Batman universe, basically, about Gotham. I think that'll be interesting to see how they blend those things. It seems like a shoo-in because of what we know and what that world is like. My two favorite characters are Fish Mooney
Jada Pinkett Smith,
Selena Kyle.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that the Jada Pinkett Smith, I think, is doing a really good job and is clearly really enjoying her role. And you have this female crime boss, basically, and I think that's really interesting. Like, how does that happen? How does a woman rise up that high? I think that's interesting, and that there's an interesting story there. And I really loved in the first episode how Selena Kyle has no dialogue. She is essentially this invisible observer. I think that's a really interesting approach to the character. You have this homeless, invisible person who sees everything.
Yeah,
I think is a really interesting character.
I got to commend Ben McKenzie as Jim Gordon, because one of the things that he's doing very well is he's developing a real sense for us as the watcher of what it's like to be somebody who's inherently good, who's inherently on the police force for the right reasons in this corrupt world. He's trying to find a balance and to do his job well and to not compromise his morals. But you get this sense of how much that'll wear down on you. And to me, it makes me all the more feel that he's stronger. Like, he has some moments, especially by the time we get into the third episode with Barbara, where you really get this sense of what everything surrounding him is doing to him. And when then he steps up and you see him still, as a police officer, try to find a way to make good things happen in Gotham, I guess it makes me respect him more, especially at this age, to see him. He's very young. He's got great sensibility. He's got a great skill set in there, but yet he isn't the older, gristled Jim Gordon that we know. I think, but yet I could so see him becoming that guy. And that's a very tricky thing to do.
There's go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I gotta agree with that on just seeing the one good cop in just the corrupt city, and I love just how it's wearing down on him. By the third up, you really just see the corruption. Just it's getting that disgusting point where he's just like, "What the heck am I doing here? Why?" But he's still pushing forward, and he's still going on, and it's I'm so just drawn and captivated by the emotional displays we're getting from him, just in a lot of the nonverbal communication, just how he's presenting himself and how he's, when he's trying to lie to Barbara, telling, "Hey, everything's gonna be okay. Oh yeah, I'm okay. And you can just see the look in his eyes, like, no, he's not okay. He's getting to that point where he's almost at his breaking point, and I love that's something that really just pulled me in on the job he's doing.
It's interesting you talk about breaking point. I'm looking forward to the moment where he just loses it, because I think it has to happen, right?
Oh, yeah.
Where he just, he gets in someone's face and just lets it rip, or does something to establish himself as a force to be reckoned with, because that has to happen at some point, right? Because otherwise he will get crushed or become a part of that corrupt system. Eventually, something has to happen that makes people go, "Oh, okay, this guy's important. This is a guy who we will keep on the force, even though he is good." Like, how does that happen? He's not far from being offed by some other officer or mobster, right? I mean, it's a pretty bad situation.
You think back to the year one story where Gordon, has that final moment where he just, where he gets beat up but he takes the beating just to study them, and then goes back later and he just opens up on all of them. And I think we're going to get that moment. That's what's going to keep him there, because they're like, you know what? It's the hero cop stuff, but then he throws down. I think that's going to be like, I'm seeing that's where he makes his transition to major crimes. I can see him actually going over and working with them and either leaving Bullock, or maybe it'll be a redemption of Bullock. I don't know exactly how that's going to play out yet, but I agree with you, Art. It's coming. There's going to be that day of reckoning, and I'm so looking forward to it. Because
one of the reasons I want to see that is because I want to see more of his range. I was a little not unhappy with him, but I thought in the first episode he seemed kind of one note, and I've liked his performance more in the second and third episodes. I think that, assuming the episodes were filmed in order, he's probably figuring out his character and how to handle it. But I want to see that actor do more. I want to see more of his range. I want to see that determination. Yeah. Because as it is in the first episode, he was just kind of like really tightly wound. In the second and third episodes, it seems like he's wrestling with it, and he's had more jokes in the second and third episodes. Like he's trying to figure out a way to cope with things, right?
And also to avoid getting killed.
Right. Yes. Yes. Avoid getting killed.
Mm-hmm. A difficult thing in Gotham sometimes.
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, just from a visual standpoint, I like how the police headquarters looks. I think it's kind of cool without looking overly cool. It would be easy to overdo the design on that, but I think that they've done a good job of making it look really interesting and kind of gothic. Like the headquarters is in a really old building. And in the exterior shots, when you get like a really good view of the city, I like that they're using some kind of like a filter or something. That Gotham has this, it's like a combination of like a really down and dirty and gritty real city, and also this like slightly bizarre fantasy of a city. I think that they're doing a good job of making it seem really, really real and down and dirty, and also it's not quite like a town you've seen. Yeah.
Oh, definite. And I'm really digging Oswald Cobblepot. Mm-hmm. That actor is getting just with the physical presentation and just how he's simple stuff like just walking, and it's a constant similar walk, and when he's running he's not breaking character, he's not breaking stride, he's got this figured out to that, somebody who will have these abnormalities that that he has is going to move like this when he's running, when he's walking, just when he's kind of sauntering. I really like that's another physical presentation that I'm like spot on, and just this was a really good casting.
I think the casting in general has been really good, because everything you just said about Robin Lord Taylor as Oswald Cobblepot, I think you can say the same thing about Corey Michael Smith with Edward Nygma. I think these people really get into their characters, and you start to identify them other than just their name by their mannerisms. And I think the mannerisms are pretty key to this show. Selena Kyle has that. Ezra Bullock. These characters, the more that they're being introduced, Alfred has the same thing. Each of these characters start to have physical characteristics, the way they walk, the way they talk, the way they even posture is so critical in this show of identifying who people are and how they react. It's one of the reasons why, as I looked at the first episode as good, but as the second and third episode kicked in, I'm starting to get a lot more into this, because I'm getting to see more of these traits out of the characters, and I really think it's due to great casting.
I thought there was a great scene, I think, in the most recent episode, Monday's episode, where Oswald gets the job at the restaurant, and he has that encounter with a mobster guy.
Maroney.
I thought that was a really neat scene. I don't know why. I think it might have been... I like the actor playing the mobster. I thought that he did a great job. We've all seen enough mobster movies to understand that that's how you move up in that world. I mean, I don't know what it's really like, but in movies and TV shows, that's how it works. That's how you move up, and that's how you get in with a mob, is you behave that way around that guy. Yeah,
you got to get his attention, but it's a dangerous road, because when you get his attention, it's... If you mess up, then guess what? He knows your name. If he doesn't know your name and you mess up, you kind of blend into the backgrounds, and maybe you can get away with stuff. But if he knows, hey, Paulo messed up, deal with Paulo. It's like with Fish's boyfriend who couldn't take the beating. He's bringing the mood down. Get rid of him.
Get rid of him. And this Roney, you said his name was Roney?
Maroney.
Maroney. Okay, right. Sorry. He does that thing where he gives Oswald some cash, which in mobster movies is a way to say, I own you now. Right? Like, this is his guy. I own you now. I've given you money, and now you're reliant on me for money, kind of. It's kind of like a way to seal that bond, kind of. Mm-hmm. He gives him the cash, and I kind of pats him on the cheek, and I don't know. I just thought that was a really neat scene. I thought it was played exactly the way it ought to have been played.
Maroney's the Eric Roberts character from the most recent Batman run.
Yeah.
The movies. It's David Zayas is the actor that's playing him right now. And I agree with you on the casting. I think he's really great casting. And the great part about that scene with his interaction with Oswald, this is Oswald's way back in. I like that Oswald's one of these slimy guys that somehow manages to weasel his way back into things. And it's those survival skills that we're seeing him develop more and more on this that are the reason why he becomes the Penguin that we all know and love. But I like that it's a building of that character. And we see him like flip on a switch to become homicidal when the moment an opportunity strikes for him.
Right.
Like he can be terrified and afraid, and then he can use any slight opening to his advantage. And those twists of seeing the personality shifts that are so impulsive, but yet I don't know if calculated's the right word, or he's an opportunist.
Yes, a ruthless opportunist. I think is and he's almost gleeful about it too. Mm-hmm. He's a scary dude. It's interesting because the Penguin has never been a character I've cared for one way or the other. And I've never been overly fond of the more recent incarnations of him in which he's a crime boss. But I think that they could make that interesting for me the way they're doing it on this show. I think that they're making him into But obviously, a very disturbed and insane guy. But you can kind of see why he is the way he is, and you can imagine him rising up that ladder slowly but surely.
Yeah, I love the crime boss Penguin, and I love the especially that Penguin who there was that Penguin miniseries they had a couple years ago where the one guy was just laughing while the Penguin was present. Penguin didn't even know if the guy was laughing at him. But he maybe did. So he completely destroys that guy's life and his family and just everything just completely makes that guy's life complete miserable. Family dies. Guy ends up killing himself over the fact that the guy laughed in his presence and may have laughed at him. That's the kind of just that multiple layered of evil that the Penguin gives with the crime boss and just how it's it's the scheming and the layering, and you're seeing that being born in this guy. Just that scene where he's first picked up by those two, the two frat guys. And everything starts off very positive. Yeah, they do a little bit of the shuttle, stop and go. But when they finally let him in the car, he's sitting there drinking a beer, and he's like, yeah, and my luck is changing. I'm now sitting here having a nice cold beer with my two friends. And the guy's like, hey, you ever notice that anybody ever tell you walk like a penguin? No.
No one's ever told
that guy dies.
and he was really ready to make them his new friends.
Yes. Right. But all it took was one comment, and they're both dead.
Yeah. That's a guy to be reckoned with right there.
Oh, God, yeah. I'm so pleased with how Penguin's coming out in this series.
Episode 3, I really liked Bruce Wayne and Alfred's sparring session.
Yeah, that was neat. Yeah.
And Alfred trying to teach him lessons, because I like Alfred being kind of a fish out of water as a parent. Like, he's clearly trying to instill sensibilities into Bruce, and we see him feeling that process out. The casting of Sean Pertwee, I think, is just brilliant as Alfred. I think he's doing a bang-up job. I think it's a really good casting for the character. And the kid who's playing Bruce Wayne, it's funny, if you'd asked me on the first episode what I thought of him, I'd be like, oh, it's good casting. Neither here nor there. He's kind of a background character. But as the series has developed, we're talking just 3 episodes in, I've started to really like the kid, and I like the slow pace of seeing Bruce flesh out, because he really should be a background character in this. Because, it is more of a story right now of Gotham itself and the state of Gotham's in. But yet, if you're going to have this world where the Wayne family murder is something that has set major events in motion, because I love Falcone acknowledging the fact that this has changed the way that everything operates now. There was kind of an understanding between the Waynes and the way they operated, the way I operated. The world just kind of had a certain sense of rules. And whenever the rules, I'm part of the mob, but when the rules start breaking, you start losing control of the world around you. And we're starting to see it gradually plunge into chaos.
Yeah, that almost makes me wish that we had like the first season with the Waynes alive, just so that we could see that world before it all changes.
Yeah,
I think that would have been interesting, but I'm sure they decided doing it this way for reasons of their own.
Now, and I agree with you, but in a way, I kind of. I would have liked to have seen a little bit more of, because I was thinking the episode was going to end with the parents dying, not begin with it. But again, there's that you kind of like it jumps you right into the point because you're right going. So I can't really completely argue with it. But the thing that I'm wondering,
here's actually where I will argue with it. It's clear from the way that the show is developed. First of all, I'm nodding yes when you're saying you want to see all that. I'm in. I want to see that too, for the exact reasons you're stating. But the point of the show, clearly from the way that the central focus is on Jim Gordon, this is about the Gotham Police Department. I mean, this really is closer, comic book-wise, if you're going to put it closer to anything, it's closer to the comic Gotham Central than anything else.
Yeah.
So the focus really is on the police department. As you were saying, like, I would have loved to have seen the world with Thomas Wayne beforehand. I'm like, yes, that you're right. The things that Falcone were bringing up, I would have loved. I hope maybe the series will be successful enough that they'll do what shows like Babylon 5 have done, where, you know, maybe we'll get like in between a movie or something like that. That'll show,
That'd be cool.
you know, show like a prequel to Gotham, because Babylon 5 did that. And
Right.
I thought it worked really well to kind of see, I think they called it The Gathering. It was a movie that showed what happened before the series started. So I would love to see something like that with Gotham, where we get some of that fleshed out, because it's a very rich world.
You were talking earlier about Bruce and Alfred. Would love to see Alfred as like a fully fleshed out character, equal to the other characters, less as, you know, usually Alfred is the assistant, you know, kind of. I would love to see him fleshed out as like one of the main characters. I don't know if that's possible, but it would be interesting to see. And I like the actor too that they have cast as Bruce. I have the same reaction you had, Sean, in that in the first episode I didn't really think about him one way or the other much. He seemed a little stiff. I couldn't tell. In these 2 and 3, I think that he's really well cast. You get a sense of this kid who is damaged and confused and kind of scary and intense, and it's a tightrope, because you don't want to overdo foreshadowing, you know, because then it just becomes, you know, kind of ham-fisted, and you're reminding people of the TV show that they're not watching, you know, which would have Batman in it, right? You know, and you don't want to do that, and so I'm really intrigued to see how they develop Bruce and Alfred, if and how Alfred becomes more involved in things going on outside of just Wayne Manor.
Yeah, I see a nice development coming on Alfred and Bruce. It's, you know, I'm echoing everything you guys said, where episode 1, I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't think anything really of him that much. And then 2, you're like, okay, this kid's a bit freaky. And 3, you're like, okay, I'm starting to see the birth of the bat. I'm starting to see just the beginning seeds being planting in his head about, you know, what is right, what is wrong, what needs to be done, where can he go from here, what can he do. I'm starting to see, you know, just that birth, and I think that's a really good job on a young actor to pull that off. And kind of same thing echoing with Alfred. We're starting to see Alfred get more of a groove as to what he needs to do for the boy. How does he take care of this boy? It's not just about the physical needs of food, you know, house, yada yada. It's about, you know, there's this damaged kid, and what can he do to help him. I'm liking seeing those two growth and just that development where we're getting it, but also we're still getting some really cool cop stories. We're still getting some really cool Gotham stories.
Wait, Jim, I just saw something. I'm sorry, I had like my internet browser open, and I just saw something for you for your next birthday.
Okay.
It's a giant balloon.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. The weather balloons.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
In Gotham, there are no planes or helicopters or any way to bring down a weather balloon.
Okay. I will defend the TV show on this, because I got a guy at work who does hot air balloons and stuff like that. And I asked him, like, the weather balloons and the rising, how fast do those things really rise quick? And he's like, you know, with you get a large enough weather balloon, which they look like, with just a single body on it, that thing would fly up fast. Mm-hmm. So,
but
I got to back them, saying, you know what? I like the fact that, and it was too late for anybody to do anything.
It's still up there. Somebody could do something, I suppose. But you're right. Maybe it goes up so fast, you would need some like really high flying aircraft, you know, to retrieve it. I guess.
It's funny. I asked your coworker that for the completely different reason.
Sean around with a parachute on.
Because I mean, I've got this ice cream thing in the back of my yard with bricks in it.
And I have to the odds of the body coming back down in Gotham? But
the physics of that one, that's off, because that would have the up and over, and he would be on the other side of the country, because that's part of the thing where air travel, with like some of the supersonic stuff jets will do, is they go up super high in the upper atmosphere and then come straight down. And you're using the curvature and the rotation of the Earth and all types of stuff to travel a large distance very quickly by going extremely high. So, we're going to throw the physics out for this one, because it was kind of cool to see the guy go, splat, and hit the little...
On the plus side, though, when he landed, his body was all goopy.
Yeah.
It was all flattened out and wet. I was like, well, that looks real.
Yeah.
That looks real. So they messed up, the physics in terms of the drift, but the body might have looked like that. I don't know.
The impact was pretty good.
I like that the detective kind of caught on what was going on ahead of time and seemed like he was getting the upper hand. I was glad to see, okay, this happened a couple of times, so this guy's just not going to just go along with it. He actually put up a pretty good fight, just not for long enough.
No.
A relationship I really liked in this that I didn't like in the first episode. Well, I wouldn't say I didn't like. It didn't do anything for me in the first episode. Renee Montoya and Barbara. The first episode, when I saw that, I'm like, okay, I guess it's an interesting way to bring in, the fact that Renee is a lesbian and all that. And I'm like, okay, that's interesting. As it's gone on, I really have grown to love it because of the way that they're using it. They're establishing the fact that this, for them, was a really strong relationship. These are two that were obviously in love at one point. Things fell apart because of the way life, went for the two of them. Renee had her demons, which is very true to the comic origin of her. And because of how close they were, this is a relationship that at one time was based on trust that was violated. So Barbara can read her. So Renee believes that Jim's corrupt. And when she's coming there, Renee's coming to Barbara with the intention of telling her that, hey, your guy's corrupt. He's bad news. You need to be well aware of this. You need to protect yourself. She's there because she cares about her. And she's trying to, wake her up. Barbara's resolve, though, and knowing Jim and what she cares about with him, the thing I love about this the most is this is one of those tragic relationships in comics. We know that they fall in love. We know that they get married. We know that they have a family together. It falls apart at some point. And it's the pressure of Gotham that does it. Mm-hmm. And you see right from the beginning a relationship that is two people that are clearly close together, that there comes a point where how much can these two take as a couple? I'm rooting for them. It's one of the things, I think the Renee Montoya thing makes me root for her with Jim even more. And I actually quite like the casting and the handling of Renee Montoya in this. It was something in the first episode I'm kind of like, oh, I guess, okay, I don't know why they needed to do that. Because I'm like, why do we need to make Barbara bisexual? But then as it went on, I'm like, oh wow, this would be like if a guy, she had a guy who was on the police force that she had dated, and they had this really strong relationship, and he was looking out for her. So it worked for me. I'm very into the fact that these two had this strong relationship that meant something. It's funny how something can turn, at least for me it did, with more development over time, and they're doing a good job of that.
I didn't even catch on to the fact that they had a relationship until the third episode. I was like, oh, okay. That makes things more interesting.
Yeah.
My wife pointed out that I don't much care for the actress playing Barbara. I think that she is a little too central casting. She just looks like a supermodel kind of. But, I don't know anything about her. My wife dislikes her, and she said that the Barbara and Renee relationship is 10 times more interesting than the relationship between Jim and Barbara. It seems like there's more chemistry there.
Okay.
Yeah, I can kind of see that. But
I really don't care for the Barbara character because I don't understand her. What's her job? She's a DA or something? Is she like a lawyer or something?
No. She was with a art show. She was in it looks like an art exhibitor. Curator.
How does she have this insane apartment? How is this possible? Now, granted, I know on TV shows and movies, people always have these insane houses or apartments which no one in that job could have. But
if she's on the art scene, and if she's high-end art scene, I could see her making some ridiculous amount of money.
Okay, maybe. But that apartment is just nuts, and it's like, in a way, I like it because my image of Jim Gordon is like later in life and living in, like a flat, in like a place that he can barely afford and, just scraping by. And here he is, like starting out. He's, are they engaged on the show? Are they engaged, or are they just boyfriend and girlfriend?
No, they're engaged now.
Okay, they're engaged, and yet, he like starts out in this place, which is not his place. He's just there because his fiancée has the place. I kind of like this idea of this not being where he belongs.
Right.
He doesn't belong there.
See, I like that. I like this that they're starting off in this fancy place, because I'm thinking, high-end art, she's making good money. If they were there on a cop salary, then I would completely agree with you. It doesn't fit. It doesn't work. Okay. But on hers, I'm like, you know what? This fits. This kind of feels, I like the groove of it. And I do like the Renee-Barbara relationship, and I like they got a pretty good dynamic going on there. But part of me wishes they could have saved Renee for later, because I like a young Renee Montoya dealing with Batman. We're going to get, in the future of this universe, we're going to get an older, more veteran Renee Montoya dealing with Batman. Yeah. That's when I heard they're bringing in Renee, and I saw her, I was like, I'm going to miss not having that, rookie Renee.
Oh, well, it changes a bunch of things. Batman will be younger than everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, because take a look at how old Cobblepot is. Take a look how old Selena Kyle is. So you got to give that a little leeway in this one.
With Cobblepot, I was okay with Cobblepot being older because it's the crime boss thing.
What about Selena?
Selena is close enough age to Bruce. I think the Selena actress looks a little bit older, but I kind of give it to the fact that girls do mature and develop a little bit faster than boys do. So they could be very easily the same age and her look a little bit older just because of her experiences. Because you think episode 1 and episode 3, Bruce, his physical way he's holding himself and the way he's acting, he's looking a lot more mature. Mm-hmm. He is looking like he's Selena's age now in just 3 episodes. And that's just the life experience he's dealt with has aged him.
It's interesting. Let me ask, this is sort of a broader question or like a new topic, but where do you see or want the series to go? Because there's this sort of problem, not a problem, but an issue of you have, this Bruce Wayne character who's played by, I'm going to assume, the actor is 12. He might be older, but these young actors, in 5 years will be adults basically. And you have to start asking some questions in terms of when does that stop making sense, or
they've got an easy fix from comics. Bruce would go off on his travels.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense. At some point, you could remove him from play, right?
Mm-hmm. If Bruce starts the training and goes on his own. Me personally, I would like to see near the end of the run Bruce leaving for that, and then you end the series with, because the actor will have grown up enough that he could come back as Bruce Wayne, ready to become the Bat.
Mm-hmm.
And the series ends with him, just like how Smallville ended with him donning the costume.
Right.
We could get the series ending with this young boy about to become Batman. I think they could very easily do that.
I really want the last scene on the show, the last episode, to be him bruised and bloodied in his living room and the bat crashing through the window.
Yeah. Oh, that'd be a beautiful final scene.
I'm a huge...
ringing the bell for Alfred,
I'm a huge Jim Gordon fan, though. I think there's a huge mistake here if this isn't about his journey to being the kind of the Jim Gordon that we all know and love from the comics. Like, I want to see... Like, I don't know a lot of the history of Barbara, his wife. I want to see how they eventually get married, what leads them down that path. I'd love to see kids, eventually from that. Yeah. Eventually see James Jr. and Barbara.
Yeah. Right, because eventually there's a young Barbara in there
Right.
somewhere.
I want to see that stuff. You know, I mean, that would be an interesting thing to develop in this world. So I kind of want to see those things play out and develop, because one of the things I think that worked for Smallville, and one of the reasons why we were such fans of that when that was on, was it was telling stories of a period in Superman's life that we never get to see. This show has an opportunity to tell aspects about the world of Gotham, stories that, because they predate Bruce really focusing on training to become Batman, him hitting that point of, the light switch is gone on, this is who I'm going to be. You get a chance to focus on the cast of characters that fall outside of all that. And Jim Gordon is somebody, I mean, like Alfred, the comments earlier about Alfred, seeing him be more of a central figure, you know, in the era where Bruce hasn't become Batman yet, and he has to be the adult. Alfred has to be kind of the lead figure for Bruce at this point. There's an opportunity to do some things with Alfred that you can't get away with once Bruce becomes the central focus. So there's stories here that I really want to see fleshed out at a time where, Renee Montoya, you got to stretch it a bit because now she's going to be older than she was. But even in the New 52, Jim, Renee has already gone through huge character arcs in Batwoman. Right. That, like, we don't see her on camera because those things have happened. So it actually harkens a little bit more closer to what's going on today in the comics.
It'll be interesting to see, like, how the show refocuses itself, or if it refocuses itself. It kind of reminds me of, because you have so many different characters, Gordon and Bruce and Alfred and Selina and Bullock and Fish Mooney. There's a lot of characters, and a lot of characters you can introduce. It kind of reminds me of The West Wing, if you remember. Initially, Martin Sheen's character, the president, was only going to be in like every 3 or 4 episodes and be like a minor character. And they realized really early, we really like this guy. He's going to be in every episode. I wouldn't be surprised if that happens on this show, if they just latch on to something. But at the same time, I don't know if the show is really built to be primarily about Gordon, because I don't think that there's so much else going on. I think that he becomes it really is an ensemble show, like an Arrow or Flash or Smallville. It has a really obvious main lead and then like a core cast. Whereas Gotham is much more, at least it feels to me, more like an ensemble show. I'll make another comparison, Deep Space Nine, in which ostensibly Avery Brooks as Cisco was the main character, but not really the main character. He was the lead actor, but not necessarily the main character, you know?
See, I think, at least the way, my impression from the first 3 episodes is that Gordon is the main hero of this particular series with the way it's been crafted. But I don't have an argument for you on the ensemble part, because I think with the nature of Gotham, and it kind of falls back to what I said earlier about this feeling a lot more like Gotham Central. I think it's just as interesting when Gordon's off screen. You've got the stuff going on with Barbara and Renee, and you've got the war going on between the 2 mob bosses. But all of those things really are parts of what seems to be Gordon's world right now. Yet there's definitely a different tone here than what you see in our discussion about The Flash. I think is a great example of, it's really clear that Barry is the central focus figure of that show, and that everybody else is a supporting cast to him. There are main players on this show other than Jim Gordon. I think the lead is Jim Gordon.
Yeah. You talk about everything connects to him, and at the same time, it's interesting how disconnected things are, especially the Bruce and Alfred thing. The only connection that those 2 characters have right now to the world outside Wayne Manor is Jim Gordon. That's the only link right now, and I think that has to change.
I don't know. With Alfred, I would agree. With Bruce, they got to be careful with that. If I understand what they're doing, and if you guys disagree with me on this, please go ahead. The one thing I'm liking about the way they're doing this, with Bruce being so impacted by the death of his parents and kind of withdrawn, where he's the only person he's trusting is Alfred. Outside of Alfred, the only person that he's really got a relationship with, that he at least trusts, is Jim Gordon. This builds an interesting premise for later on who he's going to become and the one police officer he can trust. If they do have him do interactions outside of the manor, it really should further emphasize the fact that Gordon's one of the few people he can trust
right.
to further broadcast that. So I don't know that I guess I don't know that I should say I completely disagree with that, because there's a point to what you're saying as far as him interacting with the larger world outside, but it should reinforce the fact, because I think it's something they've established really well. If they ended this show now, I would say, wow, the first 3 episodes in, they did a really good job of establishing why these two best friends that we know, when one of them's wearing a cape and cowl, why that guy would go to this police officer in particular.
Yeah. Oh, definite. And it's with the Bruce's coming out of his shell or dealing with the real world. I think we're going to see, it's going to be one of those, because it can't be a sudden process. It's got to be just that slow dynamic of one person at a time. A part of me was wondering if we're going to get to see some Leslie Tompkins. And I was thinking either, maybe that would be a Gordon connection, bringing in Leslie, and that's how, Gordon finds this person running an honest medical clinic and says, hey, maybe you can help this kid. Or something to that effect, or a connection there. Like you think to what the future the people he leans on and the people he depends on in the future. I think we're going to start seeing those relationships develop. Another one, I'm thinking Lucius Fox is going to be another one that we're going to see him, kind of his introduction and why Bruce, as an adult, trusts this man to not only run the company, but in some storylines know his secret. So it's, there's going to be some, I think we're going to start seeing those connections come in, but it's going to be few and far between.
You mentioned Leslie Tompkins, who is one of my favorite non-costume Batman characters. I think the first Batman comic book I ever read that left an impression on me was mostly about her, and so that left an impression. I've always liked that character, and I think that would be a really good addition to the cast, and in terms of opening up storytelling possibilities. I think that's a really good idea.
I don't see her in the cast. I was scrolling through the cast on IMDb. I don't see her in the cast, but that doesn't mean, as the show goes on, and I hope it does well, because I do feel like with every episode it's getting more and more interesting. The build is very different than The Flash, which hit the ground running.
Yes.
Right out
No
of the
pun
start,
intended.
yeah, right out of the starting gate. But I don't know that I necessarily mind the pace of this being different. I don't know that the thing I like about Arrow and The Flash has been how much I enjoy the distinction in the way that both have been doing their storytelling. I mean, we only got one episode of Flash, I get that, but it's really clear that there is a different theme, a different tone to that series. I think Gotham, it's not trying to be Arrow, and it's probably the closer comparison out of the two, considering Gotham's dark world, would be, it could be very easy for Gotham to come off as another Arrow. And I'm so glad that it's not, because I think by the 3rd episode, I really started to appreciate what the show's trying to do and where it's trying to go. And I think that build has been important for me, because the first episode, I didn't have that feel.
It's interesting. This is a show I do not want to see any costumes in. I really don't. It's like it doesn't need it, and I don't think that they need to go there. Keeping it real and about the police and organized crime is plenty. Just adding in these weird characters who eventually become these, freakazoids. I think that's plenty. In terms of the age difference between the characters, I think this is kind of interesting, because it seems kind of inevitable that one of these, of the weirder characters, like the Penguin or Joker or Riddler or whoever else that they introduce, will appear in costume or in some kind of crazy identity before Bruce becomes Batman. It doesn't have to play out that way, but because he's at least 10 years younger than everyone else except Selina, it seems inevitable that Batman becomes this reaction rather than as the initiator that his origin story is usually depicts him, right?
If we go under the theory of what we were saying earlier, though, that we try to stay away from putting the bad guys and people in costumes, you can build this idea that, because when Batman comes to Gotham, he comes to a very, very corrupt world. And the argument's always been made, did he just escalate things more? Did he create the other costumes? So you could really conceivably have these guys start doing horrible things and be power players within Gotham without actually donning costumes. You know, we could do the beginning of the Red Hood in this and those, the stuff that led into Batman. You could do that stuff eventually down the road and play into it. But I quite like seeing Oswald Cobblepot, not embracing his inner penguin. These kind of things I think are far more interesting to see. The Riddler, he's Ed Enigma. That kind of stuff I think is really interesting and a part of this. So I do link this a lot more to Smallville, where some of the age differences, you kind of go with, Smallville introduced some characters just to add that comic connection to them earlier than maybe they would have met Clark previously.
Right.
But I think it works here to not have them in costume. I'm actually leaning towards the side of I wouldn't want them in costume yet either, because it kind of fits the idea that Batman would escalate it to that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting if the Batman identity is like a last straw kind of. It's like Bruce going, this is the only thing left. We have to go, I have to take things to this new level. That's a possibility. That's an interesting approach. It's also interesting too if it happens, it's interesting in a different way if it happens as a reaction, if like what, I don't know, I can start extrapolating in infinite directions here. The other, not issue, but in the comics, correct me if I'm wrong, but it has changed over the years who Batgirl was in terms of being Jim Gordon's niece at one point, right? And then she was rewritten as his daughter, right, or something, or has it gone back and forth?
It has. It was the niece, then it was the daughter. I think now she's directly his daughter. Yeah, because the mom is it's James Jr. is the brother. I'm trying to look I'm looking up right now when that history changed.
Because it's you could easily introduce my niece, that he comes in custody of or something like that. If you wanted to introduce that character for some reason,
I don't think they need to though.
No,
it's one of those things where I think we got a good enough, rich enough existing bad history that they don't really need to modify. Like now with Arrow and Flash, they're bringing in people who weren't in the comic book universe, and I'm excited for them. Like, that's awesome. With Batman, I think we got such a strong already there that we don't need to create somebody new for the TV show. Now, if they went ahead and did it, if they gave us a good solid character, I wouldn't complain. Because, you give me a good, solid character in this universe, I'll be happy.
It would be a slight head scratcher. Like, why was his fiancée named Barbara and his niece is too? But anyway.
Yeah. Well, it's funny about that, because I was talking to my sister, who doesn't read comics, but, she knows enough of the universe because... Well, she's my sister, and I talk about stuff. It threw her because she's like, hey, I thought Barbara was his daughter. I'm like, well, yeah, she is. It's the daughter's named after the mom. And she's like, really? I'm like, yeah, and their son's named James Jr. Like, oh, okay. So it's, and that kind of threw her for a loop because she knew Barbara Gordon as the daughter of James Gordon. She never knew about the mom. She never knew about all that stuff. So, that was something that threw her.
And there's another issue in terms of age here, which this has really got me thinking. Just, it may not be an issue in terms of these younger actors aging, but because I know the movies and TV are full of actors, as old as 30 years old playing teenagers. So that's fine. Because in 5 years, you're going to have an actor playing Bruce who is, almost 18. And so you have to start asking yourself questions. And it would be interesting to see storylines involving this young man who is approaching coming into his inheritance, right? And like being like a major shareholder of Wayne Enterprises or something like that. And how people respond to it if they're afraid of what will happen when he's in charge. And how organized crime responds or something. I think that's a direction that they could go.
Oh God, yeah. And they've got enough in the histories with his mom's family, the Canes. So and that person running everything that's going on, and with who's running Wayne Tech. They've even made some comments about the company, who's actually in charge of that company, and they've made some references in news articles on the show. So that's definitely something they can go with, and that's why I was thinking introduction of Lucius Fox and him taking over, and also there's been histories of his uncle, who's a Kane, the mom's side of the family, running the show until Bruce comes back from his travels. So there's a lot they can do with that. So there's such a rich history and so much stuff to pull from, right? For them to do this, that they've got some possible future coolness coming down the line, I think.
Have they mentioned on the show what Barbara's last name is?
Keen.
I thought Keen. Yeah.
Keen? Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, they brought that up.
Remind me of where that name is in Batman lore, because I know it's in there somewhere. Isn't that the last name of the original Silver Age Batwoman? No, that's Kane, right?
That's Kane.
Kane. Keen. Is Keen in there somewhere?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Interesting.
In the continuity of where Barbara Gordon was the niece, she was actually born to Roger C. Gordon and his wife Thelma. Jim, guess where they lived?
Cleveland?
No, Ohio, but they were killed when she was 13. And Gordon and his wife adopted her. And that's how she came to Gotham City. It looks like this is her original origin. And it may have been a way to explain why all of a sudden he had this daughter.
Right. Yeah.
Whereas you don't need to do that in the current continuity.
No.
Yeah.
I'm going to be curious when that actually changed. I don't know when that changed. She became the adopted daughter of Gordon early on, and James Jr. was originally her stepbrother or cousin, depending.
Cousin, yeah.
Okay. Well, it could have been both because she was adopted.
Yeah. Right, both.
Yeah, or half brother if you're adopted, I guess. I don't know.
Two questions for you guys. One, episode 1, when that comedian is on stage for Fish Mooney. Did anybody else get the feeling that we were looking at the Joker?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
But we haven't seen him again yet, which I think is interesting. It'll be really interesting watching this show to see who they introduce, and I hope that they aren't the one problem I've had with the show is that they've handled these sort of like winks and nods in kind of a ham-fisted way, and I hope that they stop doing that.
See, I kind of like it because I don't think they're taking away from the cop story being told when they do some of that stuff. I think it's more of just as you said, just the wink and nod to those of us who've read the original, and who've got this history and who know like, hey, look, that's so and so. Oh, that's cool. That's so and so. And I kind of like I do like when they do that because again, Batman has such a huge backlog and just such huge history that there's so many different people they can introduce and just give us a little wink and nod to this person, and who knows, maybe 3 years from now they'll come back, or maybe we'll see something else.
Well, but as fans, we don't need the wink and the nod. You let us know the guy's last name is Enigma and you've piqued our interest. You don't have to mention riddles or riddling or anything. But it's not a major flaw. I'm just kind of watching it going, you don't have to push it that far. You really don't. You could just, let us know who he is and move on.
Yeah. Now, the other thing I was wondering, because I think I've solved the murder of the Wayne family.
Oh, okay.
And this is my theory. Again, I don't have any inside information, but if you go back to that episode 1, once again,
it's the reverse It's the Reverse Flash,
It's
right?
the Reverse Flash, yes.
Right, yeah.
You go back to the scene where Bullock and Gordon are fighting in the police station. Where they actually they have that moment where they go to blows and they're actually shoving, and Bullock pushes Gordon and he runs into that one cop next to him, and then they never gave that guy's name, but the cop goes, "Hey, watch the shoes." I think that's the actual person who killed the Wayne family, and it's based solely on the fact that the only good description that they have of the guy was the nice, clean, bright shoes.
The shoes, huh?
It's got to be the shoes.
It's got to be the shoes. But who is that guy?
I still think it's Joe Chill.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Like, I kind of don't like when they make that a specific person. I think it kind of undermines Batman in a way.
We're dealing with not just the Joe Chill Garden Street variety, thug. This is a professional, and that was the thing that Nigma was laying out with the high price bullets and all that stuff and everything. Down to this was someone who could afford to spend a little money on what he's doing. So
why can't that still be?
It's going to play out.
Why can't that still be Joe Chill? Because he was hired by somebody.
Right.
Which was part of the premise of different variations on Joe Chill.
It very easily could be, but right now that's that guy. My sensei senses are tingling, and I'm saying it's that guy right there. And I gotta rewatch again, see if they do give him a name. But I watched that episode twice, and I was on the second time watching that. I caught it. I rewound it, looked again, and I didn't hear them say his name, but they may have said it another time. But that cop, I think that's the killer. I'm betting he was hired by somebody, and whether it was one of the crime bosses or whatnot, I don't know. But that's right now. That's my prime candidate.
Well, it would be an interesting storyline if Jim Gordon discovers that it was a police officer who was on the take and convinced to kill the Waynes, and if that becomes Gordon's motivation to try to clean up the police, that's just the last straw. And I do kind of like the notion of on the one hand, I like the idea of the murder of Bruce's parents being completely random, because I think it plays into into that identity really well. But at the same time, I also like the idea of it being this really intricate web of, organized crime agendas, and, the Waynes were just getting in the way or something.
I think this show has one of the tougher jobs out there. Mm-hmm. I think with Arrow, and this is not diminishing Arrow, because Arrow, I think, is just phenomenal. Or The Flash, and first episode in, I would argue the same thing right now with where it's at. But it's a little bit different when you haven't had a TV movie presence on the level that you've had with Batman. Right. The expectations of and impressions that we have of what these characters look like and act like on the screen are in place with Batman in a way that very few other superhero properties, I would even argue Superman, doesn't come quite as close as Batman, except Smallville now has overtaken it. But I would say Smallville, when it hit, had some really open opportunities to tell some things that Batman, these characters it's like taking it to another level with it. I think this is doing this really well, 3 episodes in. I think they've built off of something that in the beginning, if you'd asked me on the first episode, I want to rewatch it now. Because having seen 2 of the episodes, I would love to know if the first episode watches differently now. Because I did watch it twice, but it was twice at the same time, in the same viewing without the other episodes. Right. I'd love to watch the first episode now to see if I view it differently knowing what I know.
So who's everybody's favorite actor or character on the show right now?
I gotta go right now. It is a tie between Gordon and Penguin. I think those for me are my top two, and it's tough for me not to say Gordon because I really do like. Just I can see him becoming the Commissioner Jim Gordon that we all know and respect and like and root for. But also on the other side, just that the monster that the Penguin becomes, I see that in that guy. And I think, as I mentioned, just his physical acting, his physical presence that he gives, just really gives me a nod. So it's the actor's acting prowess of Penguin really, really puts him at that top spot for me. But the character and just that character strength that we get from the Gordon puts him at the top. So those are my top right now.
I would say for me, Gordon and Fish Mooney are two of which Jada Pinkett Smith. I think to me, what's important with Gotham is the sense of the crime bosses and the corruption and how much power they have in this world. I like her with Falcone because there's this idea that Falcone's the top guy. And you would have these people, and I think she actually makes Penguin more interesting because of the idea that he's trying to be her. She's trying to be Falcone. It's all about this one-upmanship to be the ultimate power. And really, Penguin's goal is to be her and then to be Falcone. So they're all looking at the current power struggles in Gotham and trying to vie for power. So I think Fish Mooney's really a great character because she's a catalyst for Falcone and for Penguin. In a way that I think has been very interesting for the first few episodes. I do think that spot for me is going to change from episode to episode because I see as the series goes on, other characters vying for those spots and being interesting. But Jim Gordon, for me, I came to this show expecting, just because that was the first casting I heard of was Ben McKenzie as Jim Gordon, I walked in looking for a Jim Gordon story, and I'm really enjoying that. But I could see this being a show where there's very different answers. Where are you at, Art? Because you asked the question. So,
well, I kind of mentioned it up front. Jada Pinkett Smith as Fish Mooney, and I can't remember the other actress's name playing Selena Kyle. But Jim, you were talking about the actor playing Oswald, and you're right. I think that actor is doing a great job. I think he really. Like, this is a guy who is both really pathetic and horrifying at the same time. I think he's just doing a great job. I like the Selena Kyle character, I think, because she's not, like I was saying earlier on, she's this sort of overlooked character. She's, she doesn't have a home. She doesn't have a name. I mean, she has a name, but doesn't go by it. Everyone sort of overlooks her and underestimates her. I think that's just a really interesting character in this milieu of organized crime and the police and all these institutions. And here's this kid who is sort of outside of both of those systems, kind of.
The actress's name is Cameron Bikondova.
Yeah,
I'm probably butchering it, but I totally agree with your sentiments. And I know you guys both mentioned her. She's a very important character in this show because she, right out of the starting gate, establishes kind of the appropriate enigma that is Catwoman. You can see her growing into the Catwoman that we know and love, and that really is an iconic role. And I'm glad that they cast her because I think she does a really amazing job.
Yeah. Well, I will echo that. I think, again, you get younger actor and actresses who pull off some pretty cool stuff that you got to just, give tip the hat to because she's doing a great job with, when she's in the scene, she's keeping up with all these other very qualified actors around her. And like, hey, you got to, that's outstanding.
As my wife pointed out, she also has amazing hair.
It's. I wonder how they come up with the deciding on the cast and the. It's very interesting when you're casting a role like that. How do you find just the right girl to be that character? You know who's going to be in this season? Tommy Elliott.
Oh, nice.
Oh, who's he?
Hush.
Oh, okay, right.
It grows up to be Hush, but it looks like he's in for
scary.
an episode. So I maybe more. Who knows?
Oh, that's awesome. I was wondering if they're going to bring Hush into it, and we'll bring in Tom Elliott, and hey, let's see Tommy. Hey, well, again, that'll be something that'll be a nice little wink and nod to those of us who know who he is, because I can't see them showing him as this evil monster at a young age.
Yeah,
Well, he wasn't, though.
Here's another possibility in terms of characters that they can add would be like Bruce Wayne, as of how the show is now, has no friends at all. I mean, he has Gordon, who's like a friend, and he has Alfred, but I wonder if it will have a storyline in which he has a friend for a while or someone who he thinks is a friend.
Well, I wonder if that'll be Tommy Elliott.
Yeah. That would be interesting.
Because that would definitely fit the character and his motivation later on, because it was kind of out of jealousy and whatnot for everything that Bruce had.
Or they could, this is a complete joke, but they could go Smallville and have him and the Joker be pals, hard like a season, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, I'm still hoping we get an episode where they're driving through Smallville. Because they in the comic book have had childhood encounters between a young Clark Kent and a young Bruce Wayne. And I doubt they'll do it, but I would be on cloud nine. Even if they just have them driving through Smallville and they show some kid in glasses and they drive past him. Just that little bit, I'd be happy. But an actual interaction between a young Clark Kent and a young Bruce Wayne would be awesome.
Yeah, that'd be fun. It's interesting because it's not ostensibly in the same timeline as Arrow and the Flash, but it's not on the same network either. So it's an interesting choice, to go essentially back in time. Although it's not a specific time, but it's in some kind of indistinct time period within the last, like maybe 10 years, right? I think is kind of, well, maybe more, but like the cars are all kind of old, and the phones the characters have cell phones, but I don't know if I've seen anyone with a smartphone.
It's
trying to think.
It's one of the interesting things you can get away with Gotham. It's very easy, if done right, to make Gotham this unexplainable time.
Right.
Like, you don't know, is it classic? Is it happening now? Did it happen a few years ago? Just a few little character choices can make it interesting. I don't know. You're right about the technology part. I don't know that
I don't remember seeing a smartphone.
It seems like I read something, like some little interview with, a production designer or one of the writers or something, and they were talking about that, about how all the cars are from like, the 70s and the 80s, and that there weren't smartphones. And like a couple of other choices that they've made. It's the same thing that the animated series did. Like all the cars were like, like big cars from the 40s, right? And people had, but they had computers, and this kind of weird mishmash of time periods.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you guys want to say about Gotham?
It needs a theme song. It almost doesn't have one.
Oh, because of the, I kind of like the way that they do a James Bond kind of intro to it, though. Like, there's like this thing that happens, and there's always some event that leads to the Gotham logo.
Yeah. But there's, the music just seems this kind of indistinct. It seems just sort of, I know this is to some degree how a lot of TV shows do it now. They don't really have like a theme song because it's kind of a time waster. It's like a time period in which you could change channels, so they want to keep things moving. But yeah, if I were to pick and choose like little things to add, I would like a more identifiable couple bars of music or something.
Music is interesting to me too because it always sets a tone,
right?
Which would be a good way to give the actual city itself a theme.
Right. I love the Arrow theme, which is not really like a theme. It's just kind of like a few notes, really.
Yeah, but it just works.
Yeah, it works. It's great.
Arrow, to me, it's a superhero television show template. I think they've done a really great job with that show as far as, talk about a build. You start off with a show that had a very simple premise, and it gradually got more and more complex and evolved with the characters surrounding. It started off with Ollie being the central figure and building a world around him that was much, much larger.
Yeah. It's well, and like all of these characters who he has either had interactions with in the past or is inspiring now. You know, I mean, it seems like all the characters are either characters he encountered in the past or characters who are reacting to him now.
Yeah, I can't wait. I can't wait to.
Yeah, this is going to be a good season. I'm very excited for all the shows we got coming down the line. So it's I definitely, to anybody who watched just the first episode of Gotham is like, I don't know, you gotta give these the multiple episodes a try.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, the first episode was a little not quite there.
Yeah. And it's been a solid improvement, and I think just everything going on and scenes for the scenes they show for next week. There's a couple so like, ooh, that's gonna be interesting. So they're definitely keeping the engine going, and it's I'm very excited.
Yep.
Cool. I think we're going to do, we talked about it on the episode, seeing as we're a little over 2 hours in at this point, we're going to do a follow-up probably in a few weeks. We'll kind of do a Arrow chat. And I think we can do the Arrow chat and look forward as far as what other shows are coming up down the road. But it's always fun to kind of geek out about these things. And it'll be fun with Arrow to kind of touch base on where Season 3 kicks off. So let's take a look at a few episodes of Season 3 and come on back and talk some Arrow. Because Art, your journey on Arrow I think is going to be interesting to talk about. Because if I remember correctly, following some of your comments, you didn't jump on Arrow right away?
No, I wasn't real interested. It's just not a character I've ever been into per se. On a couple people's recommendations, I started watching it on my tablet while I would wash dishes. Basically, like I would wind up washing dishes like late at night, and everyone's in bed. I'm like, oh, what am I going to do while I do this? So I just started watching Arrow. Yeah, and it really improved like halfway through the first season, and now I'm kind of scrambling around trying to find episodes from the second season other than the ones that they have online. I probably won't be watching the first episode of the new season until I can get a little better sense of being caught up, but I will watch it soon.
Let us know when you do, because then we'll do a follow-up on Arrow with where you're at with Season 3 and how you like it. And it'd be fun to talk to you because your journey's so different than what ours was with it. It would be fun to talk to you about that ride and how you got to where are you and how you got there. So I think that would make for a very interesting discussion. So let's plan to do a follow-up with that.
Okie doke.
Right. Well, Art, once again, as always, thank you for joining us. And let's shout out your website, because it's your portal, really, for everyone to find information about you and to connect with you.
You can if you want to just Google me, you can just type in artlyon.com or artlyonart.com. Or actually, I think if you type in my name, Art Lyon, I think my WordPress blog will be one of the first results. You'll also get results for art museums in Lyon, France, but that's not me, which is I find hilarious. But yeah, that's where I post stuff, and you can see my portfolio and my bibliography and stuff I've done, and I don't post there as often as I would like, but I do post. So.
Yeah, it's really great content, so I highly encourage everyone to check out Art's site and check out Art's work. Art, you've done so much in comics, you've written articles and commentary, and there's your color work's amazing. So it's always interesting to see various projects that you are in, different things that you're doing, whether it's creating content or commenting on a fan project or something like that. It's very interesting. And you are a big poster in the Facebook group as well, which we really appreciate.
Yeah. I like being involved in those conversations.
So, as always, thank you for joining us, buddy.
You're welcome. I'm glad to give back, glad to help create some content, and it's always great to hang out and geek out with you guys.
All right.
Cool, man.
To the Batmobile. Let's go. Atomic batteries to power. Turbines to speed. You're ready to move up.
Want to remind everyone about our show website. It's ragingbullets.com. You'll find all kinds of content there about what's coming on with the show editing, what we're releasing next. I do a lot of brainstorming on the site, and it's just kind of to keep you in the loop on where the show is at. So please be sure to check that out. I do link that to our Twitter. So if you're a Twitter fan, you can get our information right from there. I also have it linked to our Raging Bullets Facebook page. We also have a Raging Bullets Facebook group. It's a thriving community we share with DCinfinite.com. And if you haven't checked out a Facebook group before, it's a terrific community that's grown so far beyond our show. It's made up of fellow fans, bloggers, podcasters, you name it. And the conversation goes beyond just DC. It's all kinds of pop culture discussion on there. A friend of the show, actually, Art Lyon, posts there regularly as well. So it's a great way to interact with just a wonderful, safe, thriving, fun community. And I really like being a part of it. So I just want to shout out everybody who's over there. We have a Google Plus page. I have a personal Facebook page and Google Plus page, and feel free to add me. I love talking with people from the show. I tend to post from my personal Facebook account. I use the Raging Bullets account kind of as a utility account. So if you want to interact with me directly, please feel free to add me on Facebook or Google Plus on my personal pages. I'd love to connect with you. It's one of the nice things about the show. We have a show voicemail line, and voicemails will be on next episode. It's 1-440-388-4434 or Dr. Norge on Skype. And like I said, we love having you part of the show, so feel free to call in. There will be voicemails on our next episode. Once again, sponsoring us is DCBService.com and InStockTrades.com. Over at DCBService.com, pre-order Secret 6 number 1, $2.99 regularly, 50% off, only $149. Besides the wonderful writing of Gail Simone, Dale Eaglesham's on the artwork, and I'm just super excited to see how that book's going to turn out. It's going to be fantastic. Love Secret 6. Over at InStockTrades.com, remember to check out that 50% off sale they're running. They've got things like All New Dupe, $16.99 regularly, 50% off, only $8.49. Captain Marvel trade paperback number 1, $17.99 regularly, 50% off, only $8.99. Unwritten trade paperback volume 10, War Stories. I'm a big fan of Unwritten. $14.99 regularly, 50% off, only $7.49. These are the kind of deals that I love over at InStockTrades.com. Remember, they rotate them regularly, so if you're looking for something, make sure to check out their site and see what kind of deals. Orders of $50 or more give you free shipping over at InStockTrades.com. Our next episode, Jim and I are going to be trying to come back a little bit sooner with this one. We've got this one already recorded. We're joined by longtime friend of the show, Freddie E. Williams II, and Jim Mitchell, as we discuss their work on Robert E. Howard's Savage Sword number 9. They did a Conan story over there. We talk about their relationship, and it's a fun opportunity to talk to a writer and artist about their work. So it's going to be a pop culture and whatnot show. Jim and I will then be following that up with an all-comic chat episode about some of the new comics that have been released. I'm talking about new creative teams that have changed and brand new comic book releases that have come out of DC. Plus, we're going to talk about the Green Lantern event, Godhead. So we have lots of content coming your way next week. We will see you then.
Bye!
On November 13th, Sean Whalen was asked to stop constantly talking about comic books. That request came from his wife. Deep down, he knew she was right, but he also knew that someday he would find someone that would talk to him. With nowhere else to go, he appeared at the home of his childhood friend Jim Segulin. Sometime earlier, Segulin's boss had requested that he shut up about his comic books and never speak of them again. Can two grown men put out a DC Comics podcast without driving each other crazy? It's Raging Bullets, the DC Comics fan podcast. With Sean Whalen as Dr. Norge, and Jim Segulin as the Sensei of the Whatnot and the Duke of You Know. It's a spoiler podcast, so they will go in depth into the plotline, story twists, and whatnot of the comics they are reviewing. So if you haven't read the books, you may want to come back later so you may better enjoy the show.